And welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Pinstripe Prospects Podcast, episode 4 of season number 2. We're happy to be back with you. Spring training games have finally gotten underway, and the Yankees got a win on Tuesday, but they probably really lost on Tuesday when you think about it. We're obviously going to get into the big Luis Severino news. That's going to be the bulk of the show. We're going to also look at the takeaways from the first 4 spring training games. We'll talk about Jay Happ. We'll talk about Jordan Montgomery, a little bit of Chris Gittens. He's done pretty well at first base. We're going to also do a little minor league segment where we start looking at Yankee prospects by position. So today's episode, we're going to focus on first base. But we also have a special guest coming up for you to listen to. It's the Yankees beat writer over at Newsday, Erik Boland, who was in Dunedin on Tuesday for the Brian Cashman's impromptu press conference. And Erik Boland's all over the scene. He's going to give his thoughts on the Yankees so far and how he covers a spring training game. I think you guys are really going to enjoy that. I'm pleased to be joined once again by my co-host, James O'Connell. James, welcome back. How are you?
Hanging in there, I guess, as the bad news just keeps piling on with Luis Severino and whatnot. But it's not panic time yet, and we'll get into it. But yeah, I'm doing well.
So again, we want to remind you can follow us on Twitter at Pinstripe Pros, like us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram. You could also, if you have a question or a comment that you want us to talk about, feel free to call our voicemail number throughout the week, 908-376-6360. You can also subscribe to us on iTunes. Please give us that rating. A 5-star would be nice, but we want to hear from you. If you have a comment that you want to hear more of a certain topic or you want us to have a certain guest on, we want to hear from you. So please leave a comment as well as that 5-star rating. We're also on Spotify, Stitcher Radio, wherever you get your podcast. Just search Pinstripe Prospects Podcast, and you will probably find us somewhere. So let's get into Luis Severino, of course. Went back to New York for the tests, and it was determined that he will undergo Tommy John surgery. Luis Severino released a statement on Tuesday night, which I'll read in a little bit once I pull that up. But, James, I'll start with you. Just the initial reaction. You and I probably both let out a few choice words when that came out earlier on Tuesday.
I was actually in class, and I was just paying attention in class. Then I see the update come across my phone, and your heart sinks because it's just it's our worst nightmares as it pertains to Luis Severino coming true. Like when you hear forearm, you're never excited about an injury. You're like, oh, maybe we dodged a bullet here. No, when you hear forearm, it's kind of detrimental. It might lead to Tommy John surgery. I'm more kind of disappointed for Luis Severino. I think, echoing what I said last week, this is just a supremely talented arm. And we've been robbed. It's going to be 2.5 seasons of just really not seeing him at all. This is a guy that came up in 2017, 2018. Even when he came up in 2016, you said, man, this kid's got it. You just knew this kid, Severino, had the goods. And man, it's so disappointing how limited the look we've got at him so far. But the misconception that I think many people have is that they're upset because they think the Yankees are screwed because they lost to Severino. No, I think everyone's emotions are geared towards like, man, we can't watch Seven anymore. The Yankees as a team, I think, are going to be absolutely fine. I really don't think they're going to skip a beat because, again, he pitched 12 total innings last year. And they won 103 games. They overcame injury after injury. Severino wasn't a part of that team last year. Sure, he had his postseason appearances, but he played no sort of role in the 2019 Yankees who were so successful. You bring in Garrett Cole and James Paxton will be back, and it sounds like May. It sounds like we got pretty good news on Paxton. Maybe we'll address that later. Masahiro Tanaka, you put your trust in him. He'll be there, And Jordan Montgomery, these guys will pick up the slack. They will. These are proven to an extent arms that can get it done to some degree. So I'm not really worried about how the Yankees perform. I am worried about the future of Luis Severino.
So here's Luis Severino's statement. After much consideration as well as consultation with the Yankees organization, my family, my representatives, I've elected to adhere to the advice of the medical professionals undergo surgery to repair my injured elbow. I'm extremely disappointed that I will not be able to put on a Yankees uniform and compete with my teammates this year, but I promise that I'll be working tirelessly during this process to come back stronger than ever to make the greatest fans in baseball proud. Thank you to everyone that has reached out during this tough time. My family and I deeply appreciate the kind words and well wishes we have received. Through the long road ahead, your continued support means the world to me. I'll be back on the mound soon to help bring a championship back to the Bronx. And James, I mean, we'll I'm sure go back and forth a little bit. It's terrible for Severino, who
Yeah,
got the 4-year, $40 million contract. It looked like he was turning a corner. To me, it just feels like I don't know when we're ever going to see the consistent, dominant Luis Severino. We've seen it in glimpses, but I don't know though if we're ever going to see that fully dominant, consistent ace type guy that everybody expected him to be, and that's the sad part of this.
that's why looking at this post here is just so depressing. Like it's like, man, we losing this guy again. Like you never really even had him for 2 years, and he's already just. I don't know. It really is just so depressing looking at it. And this was one of the core guys coming up, like of the new, of the baby bombers. Luis Severino was a baby bomber. He was the first baby bomber. He came up with 2015, correct? He was part of that 2015 wildcard team, I believe. So he was the original baby bomber, Luis Severino, and you're basically losing him. Can you count on Luis Severino for the future? No, you really can't, because this injury, Tommy John surgery, there's no guarantees. Nowadays, it's people come back, it's a little better, but I don't know, man. It's just so depressing that you're losing this homegrown talent again.
And I saw somebody tweet to say, forget who was the one who tweeted it. Look at next year. James Paxton, free agent. Masahiro Tanaka, free agent. And you're left with Garrett Cole, Luis Severino coming off Tommy John surgery. We'll see what happens with Domingo Germán down the road, but that also puts 2021 into the little bit of a picture here at the Yankees rotation.
Yeah, I tweeted out. I said the door has never been kicked more open now for a James Paxton pursuit in the offseason, because I kind of came to grips that you have Severino, maybe you bring back Tanaka, you have Montgomery, you have Clark, Ben, David Garcia coming up. Maybe you let James Paxton walk because injury history, this and that. I don't know if at this point that they're gonna let James Paxton walk. You might have to bring that arm back at whatever cost. Not whatever cost, not like an irresponsible cost, but you might have to bring James Paxton back. Like I said, I came to grips that maybe he'll be wearing another uniform next year. Make a nice trade with Justice Sheffield to James Paxton, get 2 good years out of him in sayonara. No, you kind of need him now because you don't have many proven top frontline starters on that staff now. It's really just down to Garrett Cole and James Paxton. And of course, Tanaka, he gets it done in the postseason. Has a history of getting it done in the regular season. It just, from what we saw last year. But I think no matter what, Masahiro Tanaka's coming back, unless some team makes a ridiculous offer. Teams are going to be probably scared by that torn UCL. I don't see him leaving New York. But I saw James Paxton leaving New York, and now I'm in question about that.
So looking at the Yankees, I know you mentioned a little earlier, there's not really a lot of concern with this big league team for this year. I still think there's some concern because you just get that vibe. And I know this Yankee team bounced back last year, next man up. But you've had the Paxton news, and now you wonder how much pressure is going to be on Paxton when he comes back because while he was dominant to end the season, he didn't start well off last year, and he's going to have to be that guy again. Tanaka, you don't know. He's going to be consistent, but you kind of need him to be a step above that, which you're a little worried about. J-Hap pitched well on Saturday. We'll get to him later. You're relying on Montgomery coming back and whoever wins that 5th starter job. I still think the Yankees win this division. I just think their margin for error is just continually shrinking because the Rays are a good team. I think the more injuries this team might have, it just pushes the gap to where Tampa can make this a race in September. That's the only concern I have with these injuries mounting up.
See, that's not even a realistic thought in my mind. Honestly, I don't. Tampa Bay, even without Luis Severino, is not on the same level talent-wise as the New York Yankees. Of course, if injuries pile up, well, you can't really do much about it. But as of right now, as it stands, sure, again, like I said before, the PTSD with the injuries and stuff. But you got to look at the roster you have right now. There is really not much debate about who's a better ball club, the Yankees or the Tampa Bay Rays. So it's literally not even a thought in the back of my mind that, man, Tampa could win this division. No way, dude. Like just absolutely no way. Now, sure, Severino's out, but we can't disregard how good the Yankees lineup is. No, so far And crossing my fingers here. So far, nobody in that lineup has been really detrimentally hurt. If you want to count Aaron Hicks, so that lineup's still intact. Until you lose half that lineup like you did, or 3/4 of the lineup like you did in the beginning of last year, then you start panic time. And that's when it's like, well, this division could really, really head the other way. But as long as that lineup's intact, that bullpen's intact, don't forget about that weapon in the bullpen, and Garrett Cole and at least Tanaka are there. There is zero doubt in my mind the Yankees are the best team in this division.
Yeah, I think that, again, they're still the favorite in the AL East. I don't think anything changes that, at least right now. And they're getting good news on Aaron Judge, so that helps. That right now it looks like he's going to be fine for opening day, and that's great news when he eventually gets to a spring training game and gets his at-bats going. It's just you worry about what happens if does Aaron Judge have a setback. Like, the setbacks creep in your mind. I don't blame Yankee fans if they have that mindset where, okay, is this happening again and again and again and again, where it might get to a couple more injuries down the road, and you can't avoid injuries, obviously, like you mentioned. Tampa's still good. And again, Blake Snell is a big wild card too, because Blake Snell, coming off a year where he was battling injury last season and wasn't his dominant self from 2 years ago. So that's also a factor, I think, in the Yankees' favor. We don't know which Blake Snell is showing up, but I think it's still a 2-team race in the AL East, and that's where you worry about. The more you come back to the pack, you want to be in a case where you can rest your bullpen like they were able to do last year in September, because if you have to use the bullpen a lot early, you can't really afford to use them late.
Yeah, I really don't even see it as a race in the American League East. Like, I really don't. Tampa's just not. You mentioned the injury concerns. Well, don't forget, Tyler Glasnow was out for pretty much all of last season as well. Sure. There's an injury concern as well. You have Blake Snell, who had his injuries and his struggles. You have Charlie Morton, who is 36 years old. He's an older starting pitcher. So injury concerns, you could really nitpick from any team in baseball. Sure, the Yankees had a historic season last year for injuries, but you can't go into the season with that mindset that, well, Tampa could potentially win this division because the Yankees always get hurt. You can't have that mindset yet until all the Yankees are hurt, and then you have it on paper comparing the two teams. Then you can make an argument. Okay, well, it looks like Tampa might be the better team right now. Tampa might be on the Yankees kind of level here. I can give them a run, but until that happens, really, you just got to stay status quo. You got to kind of calm down, get it together. Sure, you lost Severino. Paxton will be back in May. But again, this lineup, this bullpen, and Garrett Cole are still in pinstripes. And until something explosive happens somewhere in one of those areas of the team, I'm not worried at all about the Tampa Bay Rays. At least for the division, at least in the regular season. In October, it's a different story in the games in a series. Sure, I'm worried about anyone. Anything could happen in a 5-game series or a 7-game series or whatever. But I'm not worried about the Rays kind of outlasting the Yankees in the regular season just yet.
Fair enough. I think we'll definitely see where that goes as everything moves closer. We want to remind you it's a new era over at Pinstripe Prospects. We are now providing exclusive minor league content to paid subscribers with our new Dugout membership program. You'll get scouting reports, player interviews, features, minor league spring training coverage, which is only a couple weeks. Our own Rob Pimster is going to be down there and providing great coverage for you, and much more in addition to some of our free major league coverage. Sign up today for our Dugout membership programs for either $7 a month or $63 a year. And by signing up, you have the opportunity to enter contests for game-worn Yankees minor league jerseys, other great giveaways. So if you want to get part of these giveaways, you've got to subscribe. So we're looking forward to getting your subscriptions and enjoying all the content that Pinstripe Prospects provide. So without further ado, I want to kind of get right into it. So in a couple seconds, you're going to hear our interview with Yankees beat writer for Newsday, Erik Boland. He's going to talk more about the Severino injury, what he thinks about the back end of the rotation. We'll get into how he covers the spring training game. Garrett Cole, we'll have a little fun with him along the way. So please enjoy our conversation with Erik, and we'll be right back to talk about the takeaways from the first few spring training games. And joining us now here on the Pinstripe Prospects podcast is the beat writer for the New York Yankees from Newsday. And, well, we picked a good day to have him for the crazy news in Yankee land today. Please welcome Erik Boland to the show. Erik, welcome. How are you today?
I'm doing great, gentlemen. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So
yeah, a little depressing.
It's been that kind of day. So, like I said, we picked a good day to have you. So let's just start there. What's the buzz around the Severino news in Yankee camp? Just give us everything that went down today, talking to Brian Cashman on what the news is on Severino.
Yeah, so it's just one of those. You cover this team long enough. One of these days, I don't want to say you get used to it, but I guess you kind of do. We knew Severino was going back to New York to get some additional tests done on the mystery of the soreness of his right forearm that he talked about last week. And there was no news yesterday. The testing was supposed to take place yesterday, today, and then maybe tomorrow as well. We went down in the sixth inning or so of the game today, and Brian Cashman was standing outside the Yankee clubhouse, and Jason Zillow, the director of media relations, said, Cash has some Severino news. And at that point, you kind of figure if it was completely positive, they wouldn't have held an impromptu press conference like that in the sixth inning of a game. So, Cashman said what he said, and the torn UCL and now Severino obviously done for the year, and the way recovery is for Tommy John surgery, you have to figure next year's in jeopardy too.
Yeah, Eric, the thing with the Yankee fans is they kind of have PTSD after last season with all the injuries and stuff. You see Luis Severino go down, you see James Paxton go down, you think, well, it's the same story, even though they have a brand new training staff. You could see why fans would be so distraught and just completely depressed. But should the blame really be on the new training staff here? Should Yankee fans still feel like this is kind of an incompetent kind of group that can't get a grasp on the injuries? Or is this kind of just a layover from last year, how, just a previous injury from the ALCS last year?
These types of things are above my pay grade, and I'll do something that more people in my business should do, which is acknowledge when they don't know something, or when something's beyond their field of expertise. And when you're talking about these types of things, evaluating injuries and treating players, et cetera, I didn't go to school for that. I'm not so sure that you can lay at the feet of last year's training staff and medical staff. Obviously, there was a huge overhaul in the offseason as a result of the record 30 players that were put on the injured list last year. But I'm not sure you can lay at the feet of the departed staff all of those injuries. There was an awful lot of fluke injuries that took place last year. Now, obviously, there were some setbacks that took place during some guys' rehabs, and I think that certainly played a role in many of the changes that took place and some of the soft tissue situations that crept up with certain guys like Gary Sanchez, using, just one example. Maybe it was time to do an overhaul. But again, there were a lot of fluke injuries that took place too. And when you look at the Severino one, look, he complained of some discomfort starting in the postseason last year, and the Yankees did everything in the offseason that you would want a team to do when a pitcher or any player is complaining about pain, soreness, discomfort. They did an MRI. They did multiple MRIs. They did a CT scan. They had him seen by multiple specialists a couple of times, a couple of trips that he made back to New York in the offseason, and none of the tests showed anything. And then when they did a little bit more intensive tests with the die-cast MRI, that finally showed the partial tear, which I'm guessing because he said that he first felt something in Game 3 of the ALCS last year, you could probably date it back to that. But in terms of who do you blame, and is it the old training staff's fault? Does it fall under their purview, or does it fall under the new staff's purview? I think it's a guessing game, and I definitely understand Yankee fans' frustration. If I was a Yankee fan, if I was a fan of any team that placed that many guys on the injured list, and then the next season started in a similar vein, and even Luke Voigt, kind of when we were talking to him in the clubhouse in Dunedin after the game, kind of, and I'm paraphrasing here, is said, it's crazy. You think it can't get any worse, and then it's here we go again. And so I think Yankee fans feel that way. I think some of the Yankees players themselves, when they heard the Severino news, felt that way too. But again, in terms of where you disperse the blame for that, I'll tag out on that one.
So who would you say right now, Eric, with Severino out, the Yankees need two starters with Jay Happy, the number 3. Who do you think right now is the favorite to be the number 4 and number 5 starter come opening day?
Well, I mean, I think Jordan Montgomery, and this is before the Luis Severino situation, he was pretty much locked in, I think, to take the Paxton spot. You know, the Yankees have liked what they've seen from him in the early going down here. Really like the way that he got his arm in shape. I mean, he hit 94 the other day in his outing, which is pretty high for a first outing for Montgomery. He's not a particularly hard thrower. So I think he was in the rotation no matter what. And then from there, it's a cast of thousands. You know, you could see, you know, one of those the top prospects, pitching prospects that you've read and heard an awful lot about be in contention, whether it's the David Garcia or it's Clark Schmidt, Nick Nelson even. You can kind of go down the list of guys that the Yankees are really excited about, and guys that kind of put themselves in a position at the end of last year, you know, to be that next man up potentially in the minor leagues. And now it could end up happening sooner for them because of these injuries. You know, you also have a couple of veteran guys that have, you know, some notches in their belt, big league experience in terms of starting. We're coming off either injuries or, you know, bad performance, or a combination of both, whether it's a Nick Tropiano or a Chad Bettis who came into camp just a couple of weeks ago. But I wouldn't be surprised if it's one of the young guys. And I didn't mention Jonathan Loaisiga. Obviously, he'll be in that mix as well, and a few other guys.
Yeah, you as you mentioned, Jonathan Loaisiga, he's a guy that I kind of stated in this podcast. I'm very high on Loaisiga. I think he has great stuff, and if he just get a grip on his command and other things, maybe be a good starter. But do you get the sense that this is a guy that Aaron Boone and company kind of look at towards the bullpen? That may, like, yeah, they'll give him a look as a starter, but really, is he destined towards the bullpen? Is that the feeling you're getting so far?
You know, I don't get that feeling necessarily from the Yankees, but talking to opposing team scouts and talent evaluators and guys that have seen him, you know, throughout his career in the minors, and obviously the little bit of taste he's had in the big leagues, they all see him. I shouldn't say they all, but overwhelming amount of them see his future as a bullpen guy, because really he's a two-pitch guy. The Yankees still, you know, and rightfully so. I mean, you can't teach 98. And I think, you know, the Yankees went through this with Jabba Chamberlain years ago. You guys remember that, certainly, where they tried to convert him into a starter, and they got a lot of criticism for that. But I always defended the Yankees, and I'll criticize them in other areas. But on that one, I always defended them, because it's much harder. And you guys know this, watching baseball a long time. It's much harder to develop a really good starter than it is a good reliever. Mm-hmm. And so those guys are much harder to come by. And so if you have a chance and you see potential, you need to exhaust that every level to see if you can get a starter out of that guy. So I think the Yankees are probably going to go down that road with Loaisiga. Is, you know, look, he throws 98, 99 when he's healthy. You know, has displayed flashes of having some good off-speed stuff. Obviously, it's not nearly as consistent as it needs to be, but that arm strength, you see a guy that throws that hard. Yankees are going to work and give him every opportunity to see if he can be a starting pitcher. But the question you asked me, ultimately, 3, 4, 5 years from now, where do I see him? I would say more than likely as a bullpen arm.
So, of course, Eric, the one name everybody's flocked to at Yankee camp is Gerrit Cole. But what impresses you the most about Cole from his outing on Monday? And it just seems like with him, it seemed when 10 years ago was more Sabathia for the clubhouse change, it seems like it's Gerrit Cole for the analytics change, the way he seems to be helping everybody out in camp.
You know, it really, when you say what stood out, it's not so much his outing the other night. I mean, it was Gerrit Cole. He was throwing, and maybe I was a little surprised that he came, you know, 97, 98 out of the gate in a first spring outing. But he said that that's kind of been par for the course for him the last few years of his career in spring training. So, you know, I guess if he's not surprised, I'm not going to be surprised. He looked like, you know, in one inning, he looked like the type of pitcher that would anchor the top of a rotation. But to me, big picture, what's been surprising and most interesting is how much of an absolute gym rat he is when it comes to pitching. You see him holding court almost on a daily basis, talking to other pitchers or talking to hitters after a live BP session. And I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen this maybe over the years, where he faces guys during live BP, and then after talking to the manager and the pitching coach and whoever else, he'll actually talk to the hitters and say, what did you see there when I threw the 1-2 slider? Or why didn't you bite on the changeup that I threw you in this particular count? As a hitter, where are you more susceptible or most susceptible to a given pitch? You saw him doing that with Gleyber Torres last week after a live BP session, just to give you one example. And I saw him hold court around his locker for about 30 minutes in the clubhouse last week when Andy Pettit was in town as a guest instructor for a few days. And it was Pettit, Jay Happ, Zach Britton, and Garrett Cole just standing around Cole's locker talking baseball. And I wish that I could have inched my way closer with my recorder and stuck it in there just to hear what they were talking about, because I was too far away. I couldn't hear. Obviously, you can figure out they were really breaking down the art and the craft of pitching, and I would have liked to have heard that. But just the absolute information junkie that he is. I'm not sure in my time covering the Yankees, and I'm entering my 12th year covering this team, I'm not sure I've ever seen somebody who's that obsessed with getting as much information from as many different sources as possible about what he does.
Yeah, obviously, it's becoming kind of a new era in Yankees in the pitching department for the Yankees. You have a guy like Garrett Cole who's so analytically driven, and the new pitching coach they bring in, Matt Blake. What early on have you seen? Have you spoke to? Have you heard any difference of from the Larry Rothschild regime from the previous decade to now Matt Blake? Is there more machines to measure spin rates and more whatever? Has there been a really noticeable difference with the way the Yankees are approaching their pitching this year?
Not that I've noticed. I think it's too early to make those determinations. I mean, it's definitely a new era. I mean, you see cameras and all over the place, and you see different contraptions that you didn't see in previous years. The Yankees have gone all in on the analytics, and it doesn't mean that they ignore old school scouting or anything like that, but they have built up their analytics department to be if not the biggest in the major leagues, certainly one of the biggest. And the move to Matt Blake and the data science guys that you see on the training side is also evidence of that. But a few pitchers that I've just sort of casually talked to about the difference between Matt and Larry is just that Larry obviously had a little bit different approach when it came to the analytics, and he wasn't against it. He wasn't anti-analytics. That was a little unfair that people off the record were kind of leaking those types of things about Larry after the Yankees decided to part ways with him. But Matt Blake, as one pitcher said to me, speaks the language fluently, and the language of analytics. And Larry just was not as good a fit with the Yankees as he was, let's say, 5-6 years ago, or even 2 or 3 years ago, to be honest. And he's a better fit somewhere else, and certainly in San Diego. It doesn't mean that they don't do the analytics there either. Every team does it in some way, shape, or form. But the Yankees going all in on it the way that they have, Matt Blake was just a better fit. And like I said, and a couple of pitchers have used this phrase, Matt, I'm talking about, speaks that language more so than Larry did, and that was more than anything else the reason for the change that occurred.
Yes, it is very early in camp, just 4 games being played. But since we are a prospect site, is there a prospect or a non-roster invitee or somebody in camp that you have your eye on the most this spring?
That's a good question, and I'm kind of struggling for an answer on that. Throw some names at me.
Guys like a Clark Schmidt or Davey Garcia, Brooks Kriske, like some of the guys that we're seeing, like Luis Heel last night, for example.
Yeah, it's and the reason I say throw some names at me is because there's so many guys in camp that if there's a specific guy that you're interested in, I'm not sure any of those guys are going to be on the big league roster coming out of camp. Although certainly with the now 2 open spots for the rotation, one of them might slide in there. But the one thing that you hear Boone talk about over and over, and Matt Blake talk about over and over, and even some scouts from other teams that have seen the first few Yankee games of the spring, is how impressed they are just with the depth of power arms in the Yankee system. And I've heard that for a few years from guys that cover the Yankees at the Tampa level and Charleston and, the low A, high A ball. Guys that from, again, other organizations that I would talk to and say, boy, the Yankees have some guys coming. And a lot of those guys are now in camp, and you're seeing those power arms and kind of across the board, not only the Yankees, but other teams. And that's who I'm always more interested in talking to about Yankee prospects is other teams, because every team loves their own prospects. I'm interested what other teams think about those guys. And like I said, across the board, everybody's impressed with the collection of young arms that the Yankees have assembled. And yes, and Schmidt certainly is one of those guys that has stood out. And David Garcia had a live BP the other day, facing some pretty good hitters, including Gary Sanchez and Giancarlo Stanton. And you could see after certain pitches, those guys kind of shaking their head and saying, boy, that's some good stuff.
Speaking of Giancarlo Stanton, kind of a lost season for him last year. Has he had, from what you've spoken to him, or if have you seen a different approach from him this spring, or a different type of attitude? Because last year was kind of a disaster, and kind of what's been an underwhelming career thus far in pinstripes.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say a different attitude, but I mean, he's certainly. And I asked him, I said, in your career, where does last year rank in terms of most disappointing? He goes, the bottom, the worst. And it was, and so these guys all take pride in what they do, and sometimes fans talk about, well, this guy doesn't care, this guy doesn't try, et cetera, et cetera. And I can tell you 99% of the time that's just not true. You don't see what the work that goes in behind closed doors with these guys. And Stanton, his pride was certainly hurt by not being able to be on the field last year. And I certainly noticed a guy that is, very much determined to be healthy and productive this year. And, we'll obviously see how that turns out. He's going to be an important bat. There's no question about that. And he may need to play a little bit more in the field, depending on how things shake out this spring, than people thought too.
Last question for me, Eric. We are obviously with these spring training games starting, and it's only a couple games in. The starters don't play all the time. So I want to ask you a question. When you cover a spring training game, are there certain aspects you focus on more than others? Give us the insight of how you watch a spring training game this early. Like, what are you looking for as you cover these games?
A lot of times, and that's a very, very good question, you're kind of going into a game with an idea of who you're going to be writing about. For example, today I was going to do something on Nick Tropiano, who started the game, just because I write for New York Newsday, and we're based on Long Island. He's a Long Island kid, went to West Islip High School, pitched at Stony Brook University, has an outside chance to make the roster. He grew up a Yankees fan, started today's game. The Yankees didn't bring a loaded roster to Dunedin, as you guys saw. And so that was my plan going in, was I was going to do a story on a hometown kid who grew up a Yankees fan, has a chance to make the roster, et cetera. That was what I was going to do. And then Brian Cashman dropped his bombshell on us, and that completely, was scrapped. The Tropiano story will run another day. That's just one example. If I had gone to Port Charlotte, I ended up staying back and talked to Aaron Judge on the other day. One of my colleagues, our baseball columnist Dave Lennon, went to Port Charlotte. Had I made the trip to Port Charlotte, I would have probably gone in with the intention to write Luke Voigt or Miguel Andujar. You kind of pick, you see which guys are on a road trip or which guys are in the lineup if it's a home game on a given day, and you kind of decide going in, this is the guy that I'm going to, kind of focus on. And the game result doesn't really dictate it, because these results, they don't matter. And a guy that's going to make the team, you're writing more of a featurey angle to it, and something beyond, hopefully, as trite as, everyone makes fun of it. I'm into the best shape of my life. And rightfully so. Everyone makes fun of that, by the way. But you kind of have an idea going into a given game what you're going to write about, and then certain things can change that up. But certainly Monday night, I knew I was going to write about Garrett Cole's first outing. There was almost nothing that could have happened in that game that would have changed that. Today was an example where I had 98% of my story written, and then Brian Cashman said Luis Severino is undergoing Tommy John, and that story was scrapped. I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but it really depends. It's a day by day thing, and you do want to get to all the star players and the starters, et cetera. But then, you also, might want to feature someone that people aren't talking about. So it is kind of a day by day thing. But then sometimes the news of the day, rules things too, as was the case today.
Is there a case, for example, like Chris Gittens, the way he started off, or like you'll go into the game thinking one thing and then a guy might have a great game and that might lean your attention to a certain player going forward?
Yes.
To have that story idea.
Absolutely. Like, for example, I'll give you just for the roster that was on the road today. Let's say that my columnist Dave Lennon wrote about both Voit and Andujar in Port Charlotte the other day, but let's say he didn't. So let's pretend, for the sake of argument, I went into today thinking, well, I'm going to write something on Miguel Andujar and him moving different positions, and the Yankees really wanting to, some way, shape, or form, have his bat in the lineup. So I'm going to do an Andujar story, and I'm going to talk before the game. I'll ask Aaron Boone a couple of questions, and maybe I talked to Andujar yesterday, and he told me whatever he told me, and I start writing that story. And then all of a sudden, Luke Voit hits a grand slam in the first inning. And then he comes up in the fourth inning, and he hits a 2-run homer. Well, then at that point, I'm probably going to change. Mm-hmm. And I'll end up when Voit comes out of the game in the fifth or sixth inning. It's not just me, other reporters obviously are there. We talk to Voit, and then I push the Andujar story, and I write that maybe in a day or two, or 3 days, or whatever. So sometimes the game will dictate it if somebody does something really spectacular, but then sometimes it doesn't. So it's kind of a circumstantial thing. It also depends on, is there DJ LeMahieu is not in a spring training battle for a position. So if he has 3 hits, including 2 home runs in a game, I'm probably not going to change into writing about him. I'm going to cover him in some different form down the road, but what he does in a game doesn't matter. Whereas, let's say someone who's in contention for a spot, a bullpen spot, or a starting, Jordan Montgomery gets shelled or pitches really well. Then I might, then I'm going to focus a little bit more on what happens in the game, because the results, even though they technically don't matter in terms of the competition and determining who wins the competition, they do matter.
So, Eric, before we let you go, just tell listeners how they can follow you on Twitter and what they can look forward to over spring training, basically.
Well, I think my sarcasm on Twitter is something to look forward to.
Absolutely. I would agree with that one.
I don't know how many people. I tried to deliver that as deadpan as possible, but I don't do comedy. It's E Boland 11, just the way it sounds. And to me, and I said this going into camp, guys. I thought that, and we've talked about it a couple of times. I used them as examples. I think Miguel Andujar and what they end up determining for him as a role is one of the more fascinating storylines in camp. Look, the roster is set. It's a really good roster, even with the Severino news. Look, this team won 103 games last year and coasted to an AL East title, and Severino only appeared in 3 games in September. So while I'm not underselling or downplaying the severity of the injury, this team overcame a lot last year, including not having Luis Severino for 99% of the season. Andujar, where does he ultimately end up on the roster? He's going to come out of here on the 26-man roster. The bat is too good for him not to. I'm just interested, how does he do when they stick him in a game at first base? How does he do when they throw him in a game in left field? Is he good enough to where they can rotate him at some of those positions in a regular season game, or is he strictly going to be a DH and occasional fill-in at third base? So that's going to be, I think, the next 4 weeks really interesting to watch unfold. And then, yes, obviously, I think Jordan Montgomery, as I said, is a lock for one of the open rotation spots, but, is one of these prospects that we've talked about and you guys have discussed and read about for years, are one of them going to jump up and grab the other rotation spot? I think that's going to be really fascinating to see too.
Be sure to follow Erik's coverage, one of the best out there in Yankee land. Erik, again, thanks for taking the time to talk with us. We know you're busy, so we really appreciate it. Keep up the great work, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for the time.
It was my pleasure, guys. I appreciate you reaching out and hit me up down the road. I'll be glad to come on again.
Thank you.
Now, special thanks to Erik Boland for taking part in that interview, taking time out of his day to talk with us about this eventful day in the Yankees spring training. So, James, I want to get your reaction. What did you take away from our conversation with Erik?
You know, the one thing that really kind of stood out to me is when he said the reactions to Matt Blake is that he's fluent in the language of analytics. And that really excites me because the Yankees have a lot of talented arms. And you can't help but look at the Houston Astros and what they did with their with analytics and how that translated to their starting pitchers. You can't help but be excited about guys like maybe Jonathan Loaiza, Clark Schmidt, or some of those younger arms coming up through that system that's so analytically driven. You don't know what the limits are. You see, it seemed like whatever pitcher the Houston Astros touched just turns to gold. Like Aaron Sanchez came over there and threw a no-hitter. Like that was after he had like a 6 ERA in Toronto. So there's countless examples of analytics having a lot of success stories with starting pitchers that are talented but haven't necessarily reached their full potential. And there's a lot of guys on the Yankees that fit that profile.
There's a great article by Ken Rosenthal in The Athletic this week about how Garrett Cole asked Matt Blake how many mound visits you've had. Matt Blake starting to count, and Garrett Cole basically said, well, that's more than I've done. So you just get the sense those two have clicked immediately from that meeting out in California earlier in the offseason. And the way that Erik was talking about Garrett Cole, I mentioned it when I asked him that question. I feel like while CC Sabathia was brought in 2009 to change the culture, Garrett Cole seems to be brought in to give a different analytical thought to these Yankee pitchers. And I think he's been kind of like a coach in a way when you see all these tweets from the beat writers and the comments, like you see him talking to everybody. That's more impressive to me than watching him throw hearing about him throwing 98 in the first inning on Monday against the Pirates. It's just the way he's been interacting with everybody has been pretty awesome when you think about it.
Yeah, the thing I think Jack Curry, yes, refers to him as Professor Cole. Like he just holds these sessions where he kind of teaches everyone a little something every now and then. So you got to be excited about not only the pitcher you have, but the guy you have in the locker room. We said that from the start that this was a pitcher that was going to make everyone around him better. So the combination of kind of the new era, as I brought up with Erik Boland in the Yankees, pitching philosophy, combined with Garrett Cole, you got to be excited about. Despite the Luis Severino injury, you got to be excited about the future of these arms.
Definitely, and I really enjoyed him talking about how he covers the game because I feel like these spring training games change pretty quickly. We've seen it through the first 4 games where like you're focusing on the major league club, and then all of a sudden there's like a minor leaguer that comes out of nowhere. We saw Chris Gittins hit the first Yankee home run Saturday. By the way, shout out to our own Paul Pagnato for calling that Chris Gittins would be the first Yankee to hit home run in spring training. So props to you, Paul. But it just seems like when you watch these games, James, the story changes. And you even saw it today where the Yankees are playing a game. They're finally going to get a win, which doesn't mean anything in the grand scheme of things, but you're watching these games and they're close and at least baseball's back and the story can change on a drop of a dime.
Yeah, and I honestly, I could speak to that from experience too. I've had credentials. I've been in the Yankees clubhouse, this and that, and I went in one. It was a series against the Rockies or whoever they were playing. I forget, but you walk into the locker room. I walk to the locker room. I think I'm about to write a story on Gleyber Torres. I'm asking Marcus Timms. I'm asking other people about Gleyber. And his success so far in the bigs and that. Then all of a sudden, Luke Voigt gets hit in the face with a fastball, and then you're talking. Then right away, everything scraps. You're asking questions about how he is with this, and then he then like the next day he's wearing a mask, and you're asking him how's the mask, and you put that Gleyber Torres story aside because what comes in front of you is the first priority. So you're there to cover the game, and whatever happens in the game, you got to put your interests aside for what you think would be a good read. You got to cover the game, and I can only imagine what it's like to cover a spring training game because you don't know what's going on. Sometimes you don't even know who the guys are on the field. So a story could pop up, I'd imagine, from Erik's perspective, at any given moment, especially in spring training. So all the props in the world to those guys. I don't know how they do it, and it's it sounds like a very confusing process.
Yeah, it's like that down in the minor leagues too. I mean, I've covered the Staten Island Yankees for the last 2 years, and you go in expecting tonight you're going to talk to this player after the game, and then somebody might get a walk-off hit, and your story changes. We're like, hey, I want to now focus on this player a little bit. You push another player, you push another story to the side for a little bit. And I think that's what makes covering a team, whether it's the major league team or somebody down in the minor leagues. We're going to have great minor league beat writers this year for each team that we'll try to get on throughout the season. So maybe we'll get their story on their day in the life of being a beat writer down in these affiliates, because I think it's really interesting when you get to those guys. So let's get into the spring training games, because the Yankees are 1-2-1 through 4 games. It doesn't mean that much, but at least baseball was on. It felt different. It felt great. I watched Saturday and Sunday's game. Sunday was on MLB Network with the Rays telecast. Saturday, of course, was on Yes. So let's use this jumping off point, James. What were your initial takeaways from this first 4 games? What caught your eye the most?
Yeah, from what we've seen, shout out to whoever decided not to televise Gerrit Cole's debut. But from what we've seen so far, you got to be pleased with kind of the pitching. I was pleased with what I saw from J Happ. What was that, Saturday? He played Saturday? Yeah. From what I saw Saturday with J Happ, his fastball was down in the zone, which I think is a little bit different from what his attack was last year and recently. The Yankees kind of had this whole philosophy with J Happ that maybe we should throw a fastball up in the zone, and because he has a high spinning fastball. But I saw him kind of trying to nibble the corners, down and away, down and in. I like that. J Happ has to turn into a finesse type pitcher. He cannot be a power pitcher with a 91-mile-an-hour fastball. That's not going to generate any success. I know it did in the past, but not anymore. It's not 90, 91, 92 now. It seems like 81, 82 with how hard these guys are throwing. So, immediate reaction, I was happy with what I saw from J Happ, and I'm happy with what I heard about Jordan Montgomery. Erik Boland mentioned in the interview, he's touching 94 already. And I remember hearing rumblings last year that he was up in the upper 90s in some of these bullpen sessions. So I don't know if that's going to translate. I don't know if that's just a fluke. I don't know how hard he's going to get up to. But I'm excited to see what Jordan Montgomery can do. God willing that they televise one of these games coming up, because I feel like I had a little taste of baseball, and they ripped it right out of my hands with Gerrit Cole start. It's so ridiculous. I'm still mad about it, by the way.
You could tell. You could tell. You could go back to Rob's rant from last week. If you missed it, you got to go back to last week toward the end and check it out about spring trading games. But I agree with you on Happ. The placement of his pitches looked really good, Seth. He looked, I won't say mid-season form, but the Blue Jays threw kind of their major league lineup out there in a way. I was surprised how many Blue Jays regulars made the trip to Tampa the first game of spring training, and it was basically right at the gate: Bichette, Biggio, Vlad Jr., Grichuk. They threw everybody. So you had to look at that as kind of an audition for Happ in a way that he's not facing a AAA lineup right out of the gate. Yeah.
Well, granted, pitchers are a little bit further ahead at this point in spring training than hitters. That's we can't forget that. I'm not going to allow myself to get too excited about J Happ just because of what happened last year. But if he could just be a solid starting pitcher, give me 5 or 6 innings of 2 or 3 run baseball every night. Not every night, but give it to me once in a while. Not like what was going on last year. Just be a solid starter. You don't have to be the ace. Just carry some of the load while James Paxton is out until May. You need something from J Happ, and it's crazy to even think that you need something from J Happ coming in off the offseason, because we all signed off that J Happ is gone. His $17 million off the books. Now he's the number 3 starter, and it's so ridiculous to say that out loud, but that is the reality.
Take a look at some of the other Yankees pitchers. Of course, Brooks Kriske got the win on Tuesday. And you look at these pitchers, James, and Eric kind of mentioned, we talked about the Yankees' younger arms being ones you want to watch. You look at these first few games, pitching hasn't really been letting them down. Everybody out there is putting together some good efforts. Outside, I think Sunday there were a lot of walks against Tampa Bay. I think they had 8 total. You'd rarely want to see that. But you got to see Clark Schmidt for the first time, and he looked composed. Nick Nelson got in the game. You've seen Domingo Acevedo a couple of times, and he's looked pretty good. So all in all, the Yankees pitching, Mike King got in Saturday and did pretty well. The Yankees pitching has not let them down in the early stages of spring training.
shout out to Clark Schmidt, who helped induce help us see a Miguel Andujar double play. Who, when the Yankee Twitter went nuts when Miguel Andujar didn't double pump his throw over to second. So Clark Schmidt, from what I saw, looked pretty good. You could see that heavy sink on his fastball. You could see that heavy bite on his curveball. I like what I saw from Clark Schmidt. I really do. But I want to touch on Mike King. I cannot stress enough how underwhelmed I am by Mike King. I don't really know what he's got because I haven't seen him enough. But I get that it's the New York Yankees we're talking about. So we're not just going to throw out, a young guy for the sake of it to keep the fans happy. You're going to throw out a proven arm in the sense that will give you innings. But I'm really not in favor of Mike King getting that fifth spot. I would like to see Clark Schmidt. I would like to see Jonathan Loaisiga or any of these other guys really get in there because they have the stuff. The Clark Schmidts and Loaisiga, they have the stuff, and I think they could translate on a major league level. Sure, they don't have the experience, they don't have the innings, but you don't need that many innings out of them. James Paxton is coming back in May, it sounds like. So I really would rather Jonathan Loaisiga have his taste of being starting pitcher because I'm not ready to give up on him as a starting pitcher. I do not want to see him in the bullpen right away. Give that guy a shot. And if you do decide to put Loaisiga in the bullpen, then let Clark Schmidt get some big league experience.
Loaisiga, I saw him pitch a little bit on Sunday. I was very impressed. He talked about, from what I saw, debuting a slider, working that pitch a little bit, and he was really good in the first inning on Sunday against Tampa Bay. I like Mike King. I think it depends on your expectation of Mike King. If you're expecting him to come up and be dominant, you're not going to get that. But at the same time, he's going to go and put in the work. You read all the time about how he makes his own scouting reports. He puts in the homework, so he's going to come in prepared. You never have to worry about that. To me, he's a guy that I think if you can get 5-6 innings out of, keeps you in the ball game, I think you're happy with. And Loaisiga is intriguing. I feel like he's this year's Chad Green. I feel like he's a guy that's going to be that. Maybe that guy comes in the middle innings and lets that fastball just go, and maybe he provides an impact that way. With you, I kind of want to see long term what he is. But for this year's Yankee team, maybe that's his role. I'm not ready yet to give Clark Schmidt a major league job. I kind of want to see him pitch in the minors a little bit more, but you never know with all these injuries what might happen. But I think right now King's got that inside track, but it's a competition now. And I think watching these guys compete throughout these next 3-4 weeks is going to be really fun to watch.
Exactly what I don't want to see out of Jonathan Loaisiga because a Chad Green type role. I really don't want to see that. I'm officially declaring myself a Jonathan Loaisiga stan. I will go down with the ship. I do not care. This guy has unbelievable stuff, and I'm going down with the ship. If Loaisiga gets that fifth spot and he falls apart, then so be it. I'll take the beating. But if he's a fifth starter and he shines, I want all the credit. I do. I'm not having any of this nonsense. Put him in the rotation. That's it. I'm a Loaisiga stan. Declare.
Let's shift gears over to the offensive side where the runs have been hard to come by to some degree, but you've seen a couple of guys emerge. Chris Gittens has had a couple of really good games. He's 3 for 6 in the games he's played. You've seen Gio Urshela have some good at-bats. What have you seen from the offense that stood out? Miguel Andujar hit a home run Sunday. He looked back at least with the bat.
That's where I was actually going to head with it. I bet I'll let you touch up on Giddens, but Miguel Andujar, man, I was happy to see the helicopter swing back. Again, people forget how good of a hitter he is because his defense overshadows really everything about his game. But you can't discount how good of a hitter he is. This is going to be a crucial bat in the Yankees lineup. You heard Erik Boland say it. They're finding a way to get him in the lineup. And I totally agree with that. You have to put Miguel Andujar in the lineup. He's a contact type bat that'll put the ball in play, will break up some of the strikeout guys. And I know strikeouts nowadays are overrated, but you still don't want too many people in your lineup that are, as a team at least, that are striking out too much. So you want Miguel Andujar in the lineup, and you want to see him doing well in spring. And so far, he has a home run. So that's that.
Definitely, you'll get to see him play a little outfield eventually. He'll get more games, but the bat at least played to start off with, and that's a good sign coming back from the injury. I look at Chris Gittens, and when he hits the ball, I love the way it comes off the bat. He had the big home run on Saturday. And the Yankees, I think when you look at first base, I mean, Mike Ford's there. We'll see if he makes the Major League Club as a backup to Luke Voit. And if he does, Chris Gittens is going to get regular playing time at AAA. And he's been in AA for the last couple of years, battled injury a couple of years ago. He's a player that could have a good spring, bring that confidence over to a new level, hopefully at AAA Scranton Wilkes-Barre. And he's a guy you want to watch. The Yankees have good upper-level depth at first base, and you're seeing that with the way Gittens played. And Brandon Wagner had a 2-run hit on Monday as well.
Yeah, it's pretty obvious that Chris Gittens hits the baseball hard, from what I've seen so far. And the Yankees love their exit velocity. We know that. They signed Kendrick Morales last year because he had a high exit velocity. But I like what I've seen from Chris Gittens. He was the MVP of his league last year. It looks like a nice power bat. I haven't seen too much of him in the field because, again, not many of the games have been televised. But at the plate, you got to like what you've seen so far.
Another guy I think that stood out, at least for his at-bats, Rosel Herrera, the guy the Yankees brought in as a non-roster invitee. So far, he's 2 for 6 with a couple RBIs. You saw it on Saturday. He did a good job working the count. It's just the little things you watch. And I know Rob Pimpton's been sharing a lot of his thoughts on some of the players that are making their way from minor league camp to play in these games. You saw Heelan Medina pitch on Monday, which is really exciting to see if you're a Yankees fan looking forward to seeing the next future line of pitchers. So be sure to follow Rob on Twitter. Great follow. He gives you the lowdown on some of these players. You haven't seen, of course, DJ Mayhew hasn't played yet. Of course, Mayhew has played. So
I think he played the first game, right?
Yeah, he played definitely. But you haven't seen much of the regulars yet, but you'll get there. But for right now, I think it's just fun to see some of these guys emerge. Guys like Kyle Holder, you get to see play it short. So at least you get the early stages, these guys coming out and at least proving themselves in the first couple of weeks.
Yeah, that's what you look for in spring training. You want to see some of those under the radar guys. Remember, last spring brought us Gio Urshela. The spring before that brought us Miguel Andujar. So there's always that one guy emerging from spring. You're like, man, this guy can have an impact on the big league club. And it's just a matter of finding out who that's going to be this year. And I'm curious. And is it going to be Chris Gittens this year? I don't know. It might be because this is kind of an older player who can hit. There's no way around it. So. We'll see. We'll see who emerges this year.
So let's get into our series. We're going to start up here. We want to take a look at we're going to look at a different position each week in the Yankees minor league system, kind of give you a lowdown of what to expect from each kind of player. We want to give you kind of the idea of going into the minor league season of who you should watch out for. And we're going to start with first base. And we mentioned a little bit of Chris Gittens earlier, but I think the Yankees have some good depth at first base in this system. There's not many highly acclaimed guys outside of Gittens, but there are some guys that need to bring up, and I know, James, we're going to bring up Dermis Garcia, who is a player who had some injuries in the second half last year for High A Tampa, but when he plays, the power shows off with the bat, and we'll see if he stays healthy this season to make that impact more known as he improves in the field a little bit.
Yeah, big power right-handed bat. 2017, that posted a 900 OPS. And that's what you like to see out of younger hitters. You like to see some patience. He had a 357 on-base percentage, but 2018, 2019, that on-base percentage drops down to 320 to 296. So not encouraging as of recent, but the power's still there. 17 home runs in 75 games last year in Tampa. 15 home runs in 75 games. Dermis Garcia, power right-handed bat. Excited to see him go through the system.
You look back at Garcia's 2018 season, 34 of his 78 hits were for extra bases. So when he hits the ball, if nobody catches it, it's either going to be a double or a home run. Just the way he is able to make contact that stands out. I think the one thing you want to see from Garcia is the plate discipline improve a little bit. He did have 111 strikeouts in 2018, and he started off, I think, early stages. I wrote an article on him last May, and at that point he had the third most strikeouts in the Florida State League. So while he brings power, of course, in this day and age, strikeouts aren't the end-all, be-all. You want to see at least the plate discipline improve. Maybe that happens as he gets into more games.
Yeah, you hope to see again with any younger hitter, patience development and pitch recognition. That's obviously going to come with time. So yeah, the strikeouts are obviously concerning. 105 strikeouts, 75 games in 2018. 111 strikeouts in the 88 games. So you don't like to see those numbers, but you can only hope they'll improve.
Another first baseman I want to bring up is a guy I watched a little bit last year in Staten Island, Spencer Henson, was the Yankees' 9th-round pick in the 2019 MLB draft out of Oral Roberts. He only got into 14 games because he had a lower body injury, caused him to miss some time. But when he played, the power stands out. I remember seeing him hit one to dead center field in a game I covered. And while the average is low, this is a guy, when he gets the ball on, gets the barrel of the bat on the ball, it is going to travel a long way. I know a lot of people talked about like Luke Voit with him a little bit, but you see the power emerge. And we'll see where he does this year. Only having 24 games of professional experience, but he's a player I think you want to watch because it's another guy where the raw power stands out when you watch him play.
Yeah, he was in college in 2019. 19 homers with a 1277 OPS in college. So this is a guy that obviously has power. It seems like he's had power his entire career. So we'll see if that translates to the Yankee system. Obviously, very early. He only played 14 games that now last year, 10 in Pulaski. So. Yeah, again, another guy you got to watch develop and maybe a guy to keep an eye on.
And there's not as much, I think, competition at first base as opposed to other positions in the system. Like we talked about middle infield with Rob last week. I think that's going to be something we'll monitor throughout the early stages of the minor league season. But first base, really, you have, I think, a gap in between where you have the Gittins of the world, Mike Ford. Like you have your gap at first base where you're not going to really see anybody, maybe somebody surprises down the stretch this season, but it just seems like it's pretty clear-cut, James, at first base as opposed to the other positions.
Yeah, first base doesn't appear as kind of as deep as the other positions you said, or as even as the pitching as we go along here. But the Yankees have developed to an extent decent hitting first baseman. Like Mike Ford last year came up and produced. So I never have any doubt in the Yankees to develop hitters. They'll always develop hitters. That's who they are. They're the Bronx Bombers. So while the names so far don't seem too flashy at first base, maybe they'll develop a couple guys. So I mean that's something to keep an eye on.
They developed Greg Bird. I mean that's a name that.
Well,
I know that's not a name we want to talk about right now, but
maybe not. I by the way, I was the biggest Greg Bird stan. Bad news for Jonathan Loaiza, but I did like Greg Bird as well. I thought he had a great swing. If Greg Bird was on this roster today, I would still want to give him a chance on first base. That's how much of a believer I was in Greg Bird.
I want to translate over into our final thoughts. And if you're new to the show, this is the part where we get into something we haven't touched on in the show that's been on our mind the most this week. Before we do that, James, I just want to mention, as we do the show, the Yankees PR department tweeted that Severino is going to undergo Tommy John surgery on Thursday. The procedure will be performed by Dr. David Alchek at the Hospital for Special Surgery in New York. So, hey, we got breaking news on the show. That's always fun. So, James, take it away. What's your final thought for this week?
My final thought for this week is let's see Aaron Judge in some baseball games. So it seems like I think we touched on it slightly, but I want to address it.
Sure.
Everyone was panicking that it's happening again. Aaron Judge is hurt. No, he's going to be playing in spring games next week, I think they said. So I can't wait to watch Aaron Judge play baseball again. It seems like the shoulder's fine. So that's kind of my final thought is let's get the next Yankee captain going. That's a hot take.
I have the tweet here, BrianHokeMilby.com, that Aaron Judge is throwing has increased 120 feet. Tee and toss hitting drills continue. Aaron Boone said Judge will not play exhibition games this week, but Boone said the Yankees should have a plan to get Judge in games sometime after the March 2nd off day. So already they got an off day on Monday, but so you'll see Aaron Judge. Maybe we'll get to talk about him next week.
Yep.
Getting some games, so that should be a lot of fun. So hopefully Aaron Judge gets on the field real soon. My final thought, I want to take a look at the pitching in a way, and I know Eric mentioned it earlier where the lower levels, I think the Yankees have some arms coming up the system. Last year, the Yankees had a lot of injuries internally, not at the major league level, also the major league level, but at the minor league level as well. You had a lot of guys. I remember names like Garrett Whitlock and Glenn Otto, and the list go on. And you've seen guys develop, but I think the Yankees eventually, with all these arms, are going to come to a choice. Who do they keep? Who do they trade? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the Yankees' problems, I thought, last year, the trade deadline, came from the fact they didn't really have any healthy arms to trade. When you think about it, seemed to be, you had your guys that you wanted to see develop a little bit more, but you also had guys you might think about you couldn't really trade because they were hurt. I mean, non-pitcher wise, but Estevan Florial battled injury last year. So you couldn't really think of him in a trade. So keep that in mind as you go through the system this year and you watch this Yankee pitching. The Yankees do have to make a trade in July. They're not going to make a trade now. There's no reason to. They're going to see how their internal guys do. Brian Cashman always brings up that really the trade season kicks in after the draft. So it's going to be sort of tryouts here for these younger players until the Yankees decide who emerges in the trade market and who they can get at a realistic price. I mean, obviously, people are going to mention the Cleveland Indians and what happens with them if they have more injuries, and maybe the Yankees take one of their arms. You never know. But you have to see also, while you're saying, I want this guy, this guy, this guy, you got to watch your minor league guys too, because if you want to trade them and they get hurt, that's a piece or two that you can't trade in a deal, and that has its effects too.
Agreed. That's kind of the forgotten part of the trade process is everyone says, "Oh, just deal the prospects, deal the prospects." Well, the prospects have to be in good condition too. Like you cannot trade damaged goods for, let's say, a Mike Clevenger. I know some of the Yankee fans throw out like ridiculous trade proposals who think Esteban Florial is still like a top prospect for like Francisco Lindor or one of these top guys. You have to understand that there's two sides to this, and if you really, really want to dive into the trade talk, you have to keep an eye on your own minor league system, what's going on there.
So, James, tell listeners again how they can follow you on Twitter. I'm sure again what they come to your Twitter for, because it's very entertaining.
Yeah, you can come to. Thank you for that. You can come to my Twitter. I'm at O'Connell NY on Twitter, talking all things baseball, Yankees, basketball, golf, anything. If you guys want me to start talking about something else, I'll start talking about something else. I'll get into it. Who knows? But yeah, follow me at O'Connell NY. Actually, I won't talk about politics, though. It's my one rule. No politics. Anything sports, sure.
You can follow me on Twitter at Rickinator555. You can also listen to my show, Kicking with Keeler, every week, every Thursday on Full Press Radio. I'm sure I'll be talking more about Luis Severino this week, so you get to hear. If you didn't miss my thoughts, you can hear him again. But we got a good Yankees slate this week. We have a lot of home games. Of course, they got an off day Monday, so we're back here next Tuesday night recording. The Yankees will have just played a game with the Red Sox. That's always fun. It's Split Squad Day Saturday to end February. Who doesn't love Split Squad Day? I think that I always look at the spring trade schedule. I look at Split Squad games and see, okay, which part of the team is in one spot, which part of the team's in the other spot. It's early, but I think it's always great when you see the amount of Split Squad games.
Yeah, I do just televise them. That's all. Just put them on TV. Whatever. I don't care who's on the field. Put the Yankees on TV. And if that happens again, I swear, with the Garrett Cole debut, we missed Stan. Not only was it Garrett Cole's debut, it was Stan's debut. I don't even want to get into it. Put the games on TV. Thank you. But
I would have said at least radio. I think at least give us John and Susan.
I would have loved to listen to John. Yeah, I would have loved to listen to John Sterling and Susan Waldman at any point in the day, and especially when we're talking about Yankee baseball. So figure it out. Honestly, someone figure it out over there.
So again, thanks to Erik Boland from Newsday for hopping on the show. He gave us some great insight. We'll try to get you some more insight from some of the top Yankees members in the media. We're going to have plenty of great guests throughout the season. So Erik gets to be our first guest of this new Pinstripe Prospects podcast edition. Again, follow us on Twitter at Pinstripe Pros. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Instagram. If you want to, again, have an opinion that you want to chime into or thoughts on the show, 908-376-6360 is our voicemail number. You can also subscribe on iTunes, give us that 5-star rating, and share a comment what you think about the show as well. We're on Spotify, Stitcher, all the podcast platforms. So be sure to subscribe. Today, remember that Dugout membership program. Minor League Spring Training is right around the corner, and own Rob Pinchner is going to have great coverage down at the Minor League Complex in Tampa. So you don't want to miss out on that. And there's great video on YouTube. If you miss a prospect, we have awesome video from everywhere in the Yankee system that you can check out anytime you want. So go to our YouTube page and subscribe there. So for James O'Connell, I'm Ricky Keeler saying hope you have a great rest of the week. Enjoy Yankee Spring Training baseball. And be back here next week as we head into March. Regular season right around the corner, and we'll talk about more games then and look at another position in the Yankees minor league system. Until then, enjoy the baseball, everybody.
Later.